Welcome back to Everyday Executive, where I give you tips and tricks to get the life and career of your dreams from my personal experience and my journey. So one of the common questions I get asked, and I was literally asked this just yesterday again, was how do I interview to get the job? You know, there seems to be complex questions that people struggle, particularly when it's in a stressful situation at the time of the interview. And, you know, sometimes it's hard to think on your feet with those specific questions. So I'm here to give you some of those tips and tricks. So a lot of the interviews, there's always going to be some specific nuances to every industry and every job for interview, but there are usually some common questions that you can prepare for to get that job that you're looking for. So the first recommendation, and this is something that I have done and what I recommend to others, is really research the organization. Now that seems probably like, well, I already know where I'm applying to. Yeah, but really kind of dig deep into that research. You know, what goals do they set on have you gone to their website, and what goals or mission or vision do they have on their website? You would be surprised by how often I personally have interviewed or have been in other interviews with people that haven't really researched the organization at all. And so when you ask specific questions, for example, like why did you choose our industry to apply to, you can have a step ahead by saying, you know, I really am focused on your mission, or I really was impressed with the project you launched last year. Something specific that shows that you were engaged in that organization and you want to be there. So that would be the first tip. All of this is really prepping for the interview process. Research specific interview questions and how to answer them, like with this video. But more importantly, give specific examples to the question. Sometimes a common question you'll get asked is, how do you manage conflict, or how do you manage stress? So common thing somebody may want to answer that is, I am very calm, in a stressful situation. And that's an okay answer, but that's a pretty generic answer, right? Where you want to be a step above the other interviewees is to give a specific example of how you manage the stressful situation or the conflict that you can give as to how you handled that situation. For example, you may say, and if you don't have a work example, which is always the preference, so any of these questions that you can give specific examples on your past work history, that would be number one. But if you're starting out, maybe you're a student and you haven't had necessarily the work history to rely on for examples, you can give a personal story as well. So one thing you may say is, hey, I saw that I had a conflict with a colleague, and perhaps there was a miscommunication and a misunderstanding. So how I handled that was, I sat the person down and I said, hey, I feel like there's some tension between us. Can we talk about that? And what I found is it was actually just a miscommunication, and we were able to work through that and be very productive together. So that would just be an example of what you could use as to show your employer that you're applying to that you know how to handle that in a very productive, adult, professional manner. So have a few specific examples in your pocket that you already have prepped for, you've already thought about, so you can just pull that out at your next interview. Stick around for a bonus tip, because I know one of the common questions, again, another question I was asked recently, was how do you answer the dreaded salary question when they ask you either on an application or an interview about your salary expectations? So we'll talk about that at the end. Now, these are probably some common sense things that you've heard, but I think it's worth repeating. Wear professional clothes always. Even if you're going into an industry maybe that doesn't require professional clothes, really try to maybe take it one step above what the standard would be for that organization. Now, you don't want to go in and look too above, but you really probably can't. And what I mean by that is professional clothes doesn't mean a suit always. It can mean a nice blouse. It could mean a nice dress pant with a polo or a button-up shirt. Some sort of professional dress that would work for you. Don't take that for granted, because that first impression is always made in those first few seconds. Be early. And there was a saying, and I apologize, I can't remember who said this, but 10 minutes ahead is early. If you're on time, you're late. And so try to be there 10 to 15 minutes early. And if I was being honest, I would try to go 20 to 30 minutes early, especially if you're going in person. Grab a cup of coffee, sit in their lobby if you're in an actual building, a brick and mortar building. Grab a cup of coffee, observe the culture. Observe the culture of folks interacting with each other if you are in an area where you can do that. That will be an example of how you can share that in the interview. If they ask you, what drew you here, you can talk about, gosh, I observed the culture and everybody was friendly and greeted me, said hello to me. I saw them conversing in the hallway. I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that team atmosphere. So that would be something that you could do if you're going to a brick and mortar. How do you handle that if it's remote interview? Many interviews are handling and happening remotely now, particularly if it's a first round of interviews. One of the ways you can do that is go on their social media presence. Find where they're posting their social media for that industry and see how people interact on that. Comment on a specific example that you saw that was posted. Have those things in your back pocket that shows, again, you really want to be with that industry. You're researching that industry and that's the place you want to be. That will honestly get you way more ahead in that interview, because too often, and I'm telling you this from experience with doing interviews often, people do not do that. So please make sure you have those specific examples, again, in your back pocket ahead of time. Be positive, always. Even if you get asked the question, why did you leave your last employer, for example? And let's say your last employer, maybe it wasn't a great experience. Still be positive. Never, say negative things about a past employer, because what that's telling to your current employer that you want to be with is that perhaps you would talk about them that way as well. Now, that's not to say you lie. That's not to say you'd make things up. You just can say, it was just time for a change for me. I really felt like the goals maybe that were being set maybe wasn't in my skill set, or we just weren't, maybe on the same path that way. Or you just say, it was a great organization, but I'm just ready for a change. I'm ready for a change, and you're the organization that I feel like that I want to be a part of. So even if it maybe was some tension, don't draw attention to that. Really try to be honest, but yet don't be bad mouthing, for lack of a better word, your past employer. That would be the most easy way I would say to do that. If you get asked a question and you don't know, say you don't know. Own it. It's okay. It is really okay. We would much rather have as an employer somebody that's honest and comes in with integrity, that doesn't know. But what I would say to you is you need to answer with that solution oriented of how you would find out. If you get asked a question and you don't know how to answer it, you can say, I don't know the answer to that, but here's where I would go to research to get the answer. So own it, but give an example of how you would come up with some solutions to find out. If you have a weakness, that question of what are your weaknesses or area of improvement, again, own it, but give a specific example of how you try to overcome it. I'll give you my specific example. I am a fast worker. I talk fast. I kind of move fast. And so sometimes I get ahead of the rest of the team. And so I use that example often. Okay, team, I'm getting ahead of everyone. Let me take a step back and let's work together and realign ourselves. And you'll find that, again, having that vulnerability is normal. And that's actually part of the team process, that you have a team culture that you can work through those weaknesses together. So have, again, in your back pocket, you're already prepping for this interview. What weakness would you acknowledge, and how are you overcoming that? And just be answering that in a truthful way. Now, the question of what questions do you have for us? So I get asked often, how do I answer that? How do I answer when somebody asks at the end of the interview, questions that you as the interviewee may have for them? And some questions that I commonly, hear and want to know is what keeps them with the company? So you could ask the people interviewing you, what keeps you with the company? Tell me more about why you're with this company. Or what are they looking for in the person to take this job? What are they looking for as skill sets that they want to see for this job? Those would be common questions and great information for you to know, because perhaps they'll say something that may change your mind. Maybe you're applying in other places as well, but at least you're having that dialogue as to what is the best fit for this company and for you. Make eye contact, be confident, smile often. Again, those soft skill sets matter. And if you're wondering about how I got further in my career with soft skills, please take a look at this video as well. But you got asked to interview for a reason. You have the knowledge and the skill set to get to that interview. So be confident in that. Be confident in that, smile, and make eye contact to show them you really want to be there. So the bonus tip, we talked about this, the dreaded question of how do I answer, what salary expectations you have. Now, this is really dependent on, where you're at in that interview process. Some industries, it's one interview and it's kind of one and done. Other industries, you may have multiple areas of interview processes, from a screening to a remote video to an in-person, or any combination of that. So one way to answer that, let's just say it's on an application and they're asking you that question. And so this particular question was asked that I would first say put negotiable. And if that's not an option in a digital application and it has to be a number, if you need a certain salary expectation and you absolutely have to get that salary to move to that job, then you should put that. Don't not put something that you need. But if it truly is a negotiable rate, then perhaps you put 0, and you can put in the comments section, let's discuss as we move further. If there is no comment section, then just put 0, and you can have that discussion at a later date. When you get to that point of really discussing the salary, that's where you really need to think about how badly do you want that job there? Because often, in a smaller organization, there may be more negotiation room in a smaller industry. If it's a larger industry, there's probably market salary ranges that you either can make it or not. There has been times where we have not interviewed folks, or I have not interviewed folks, because their salary expectation was beyond what we knew we could pay, and we didn't want to waste anybody's time. And because, there are large organizations that have those limits, and it's usually based on a number of factors: where you live, what kind of revenue that organization makes, so on and so forth. So you really have to decide how bad you want that job at that industry. But if you're just starting out and you really just want to keep exploring, I would recommend putting negotiable or 0 with further discussion moving forward. If you'd like more of a deeper dive into how to interview, because these are common questions that I listed that I get asked often about how to answer, please comment below so that we can discuss that and I can do a further podcast or video on that. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please give me a like or subscribe, and we will talk soon. Thanks.